when we're kids, and really not all of us, we're living in a moment where the potentials and the possibilities are dancing like an ion storm out in the open right in front of us. And there's so many variables that we get swept up and caught up into the feeling, right? A feeling mechanism of belonging, sharing, and expressing. We don't realize that there are these agents, these dark agents that are involved with manipulating and contorting the qualia of our experience. And this interaction with the noumena that is existent outside of us in the Welt, the world, or the Welt, through a Weltanschauung or a Weltanschauung, a world view, an energy. We don't realize how much control we have, or how vital and important it is that we stand, and that the religions that we're given, the principal pathways that we're given, are so heavily manipulated that it's the only place that we can turn to. We are forced into a notional aspect of believing in the channeled following of, becoming the initiate, right? Or the aberrant heretical fight to go against the system. We don't have a lot of choices. I lived a life that you could say, or early on, was akin to Stand By Me. If you ever watch that. And even more so, more riveting and more cutting, would be the on-running Stephen King trail, where you have these four friends that kind of have this fifth satellite friend, but three main friends that are constantly venturing and going on these quests. And I lived a life very much like that. But the way that it came to be in the 1980s was, really was the beginning of the 1980s, the early 80s. The indoctrination and the directive, it's very easy to look at these control mechanisms of mercurial nebulous clouds of Christianity that are heavily guarded and maneuvered in such a precise way that we don't know what these powers of control, the mechanism that these power controls seats, like the Masonic order and those people that are pushing these buttons. But I will say that I knew when I was 9 years old that I was trapped in this detail of flat time, like Nietzsche expounds upon or attempts to. And that in those micro moments, in those scalable moments when you're under manipulation and attack the most, that the entire universe and the direction is placed on one kid. One kid. And that when I was 9 years old, I realized all at once the culmination that time, travel had been hacked. I'm not going to say what that is, but I knew that at that moment, as I was standing there looking up at the clouds, that it's not that I'd been there before or that I'd done the same thing and there I was again, lost in the same damn way with nobody really on my side. And the constriction of those variables would be even more hard pressed against me, to where life, because I didn't sort of go along in a direction, maybe I was being chastised. Maybe it was the culmination of several different agents and nodes. Maybe it was like Bruce Almighty, right? Where it's like I am. It really gets into the phenomenology that a lot of philosophers talk about. What where the world is my idea, or the world as my, the representation of my worldview. Many philosophers get into this type of stuff. Being in time, Heidegger, right? I'm not going to say that I'm an expert, but I understand these things, these concepts beyond conceptualization, because they create this energy, the energetics, these pathways, these throughways. I had a beloved friend that I didn't value, and that I didn't understand the value, because I didn't know my own value, because I was so heavily being suppressed and attacked by agents that came in and out of my body. And I'm not BSing you here. That I always felt watched. I always felt dictated to. I always felt like I was that missing link. I was that specter. I was that focus of power and control that these things would anchor on. And more to the point, I go away from the bouncing and, through the futility of religiosity and heretical disposition, into a place where I'm looking at it as a routing system and realizing that these people like Tim Taylor, Diane Pasulka, Gary Nolan, Jacques Vallée, I mean, you could keep going on with this, Townsend Brown, the von Neumann aspects of this, that they were invited into this, von Braun, that they were invited into this initiatory group that was ultimately all of this energy with all these minds that think that they're doing these amazing things, but they are being fed. They're like walking computational calculators that have no real life of their own. And I'd say maybe Carl Jung could be put into this group as well, because their method of delivery and the people that would become privy to this information, it's like saying that a book isn't written for a specific person at a specific time, but when you get into it, all literature, all information states that that's entirely not true, that you do have this figure, because when you narrow down all the millions of people that are postulating this, or hundreds of thousands of people, and you narrow it down into the people who are going through the ritualization of this. And again, you could look at, just as equally, you could look at the underground man, Dostoevsky's version of, or the last man, that is the Nietzschean concept, and the overman, the Ubermensch, the Superman, that they are one. The tertiary aspect of this is they are one solidified force, that they would need to be rejected. They would need to be to realize that there isn't a tribe there waiting for them, and that even the people that they regarded with such value really were constructs in their own mind, to where once they ventured out and tried to find value in those people, that the value wasn't really there. And then there's this guilt of, I failed them, which is what the system wants you to do abroad, in this world of materialism, where you have that fourth state of matter that's saying, no, you have to, like the Master Key says, you have to work beyond a theoretical abstract ego and become an actual thing, an item, an event. when you see that the plasma itself is more alive and more free. And so when we talk about freedom, we want to solidify ourselves into this material state where you still have the gases, you still have the plasma, right? So in a sense, the plasma is always with you, but you become a more solidified state. You're giving all the gases, right? Oxygen diffusion and so forth, literal gas that you're farting and burping out. What we are made of, essentially what we are made of. When you get into elements, metals, gases that are beyond metal solutions, the things that occurred through star birth, right? These 14 base elements that come from star birth, right? And gold is one of them. You look into Fulcanelli and all these weird cryptic descriptors of mystery at the cathedrals. You look at the alchemical gold, to become the alchemical gold. And the human form, through this materialization, is only given certain emotional responses, like Plutchik's wheel. It's only given certain emotional outlet and responses available to it through the nervous system and through sort of a culmination of and like we say, an exercise in futility, where there is a Welt, a world view, Weltanschauung, a world expression, a world language model, and then there is this trickle down, conified field effect that this information is going to trickle down into the individual. And then you have all these offsets, right? And then you're left alone, holding this torch, waiting for the relay, right? Waiting for the baton to be passed on to this decathlon. Nobody's there. Everybody else has somebody picking up their torch, and there you are. You're alone. And you wonder, is the universe out to get me? Or am I supposed to champion on and carry this thing up the hill? I had this very strange dream last night that I was waking up to, and it was this cartoon depiction of this machine, right? And you're starting out, and this is the quirky world of dreams, right? Is you and I was talking to somebody about this at the same time, going, "This, what the hell is this? This couldn't be real." And then I went through the process of it, and you're basically hopping into these pantaloons through 7 or so stages, and the last stage is you're a dog. Maybe it was this Pavlovian influence, because I was just looking at this type of stuff. The last stage is you are a dog looking at yourself, and that you're creating this replication of a dog. But then you're hopping through and you're going into this body and then into another body. And I was looking closer at all these transformational processes of you hopping into these pantaloons, right? And you're going through this stage. And like in the 3rd stage or so, you're becoming a woman. And then you're hopping and going into these other things. And then there you are. You're a dog at the end facing yourself. And this is kind of the abstract hypnagogic way that the mind is trying to make sense out of, again, this nebulous mercurial abstract cloud, right, of plasma, ether, energy in motion, mixed in with everything else, gases, everything that ever was and has been, everything that it could be. And then as it goes through this sifting mechanism, it has to become a substrate, and it starts to lose itself. When it's just spirit, right, it doesn't realize all the alchemical transformative aspects that, look, you're going to have to take on certain constructs, and there's only certain things available to you, and there's always a contradiction. You're going to be able to refute everything. If you were born into a Catholic mechanism of power and control, yes, there's a lot of BS. Yes, there's a dark. Yes, there's a light, right? Yes, for you to choose an angel, once you start to find out what this really means and you're uncovering the truth, these are just constructs that are expressed as to say that now that we're solidified in an objective form, we have lost the ability to hone the spiritual effulgence that can only take place when you're no longer able to interact with the physical construct. Yet it seems that the physical aspect of this, the solidified aspect of this, is as highly important. That this is the hardest thing that you could ever do. And that's why there's such a big setup. That you are walking into a booby trap, right? A literal booby trap where you're either going to wear the boobies or something else is going to wear the boobies. And when you get to this place where you figure it out and you're still alive and you're still young enough, you know, and you don't just have gray hairs on your head and on your chin, there's a good mixture of vitality and robustness. You become a threat to the powers that be because they have already decided on, they have already settled on what this world means and what they mean in it. And the simpler probably descriptor is that when you get into the study of NPC players, and then a person realizes themselves as this NPC player, and finally there's no refuting that they have no purpose. And then once people start to step in a direction where it's the only thing left and they go in that direction, suddenly they are doing things that don't make any damn sense on any other level. They were just there to deliver a certain piece of information, to cut off the transmission of certain information. And again, the best way to look at this is to say, yeah, you're personalizing it. You had to stay hibernating as an energy potential in the greater system or a computational system. But once the prompt came out through this probability code, a narrowing down of probabilities until finally, through the process of elimination, there was only left one, and then there you are. And it's time for you to go off and shoot off into this direction. And any energetics that you felt by way of you being an individual, you are merely being the energetics of people passing away, energy passing to you, energy that was left off other precursors of information shooting off in different routing directions in the motherboard, right? That you would be, now let's not call it the motherboard anymore. Let's not call it the fatherboard. Let's say that these are any energy directives that don't have to go back down to archons and angels and things like this. So, the ridiculous aspect to look at your life and go, is that why I was alive? And then I wanted to be set free, and I realized this is nothing but torture because I don't really have any freedom. And here I am standing here in this alleyway getting shot in the gut and dying. What the fuck was all that for? Here I am standing up for something and then getting shot down or brought down by a political force that is full of tyrants. And it's like you are a part of the culmination of an energy system that has the ability, though it is a very narrow throughway, to aberrantly go off in your own direction, but you're going to have all these constants that the computational system has already figured out and built a construct upon that is based on these principles that I talk about, right? And delivering this to people, they have to be receptive and they have to come to the information on their own. And so that's what EPL represents. In all its bad and good, it's to say that here you have these 6 points, and we're stuck in this matrix where these 6 points of spherical power and rule, how energy transfers and transmutes. But we have the ability to identify this through the dark attacks on us. The window is left open. These things that can just jump into your body and take over, don't you realize that the window, the doorway has been left open, and now you can travel back the other way, and it is just as afraid of you, but it knows that you're blind to it, and it has made provisions within the construct that you will continue to be blind to it. So it's not that worried, right? And then all of a sudden you rear up where very few ever have, and there you are, and you're doing it. You're rallying against the machine, right? So I liken this to these political forces that stand up against, that create this oppositional force against regimes, right? And even though it seemed like a grand failure, there was something spiritual, for lack of a better, right? And you really have to get into the nebulous aspect of what spirituality is when you're looking at matter. Is it the plasma? Is it the gas, right? Through this transmutational process. Is it the elements, right? Is it when these elements come into form and finally make up a structure that could be called a you? And that energy, that routing of that energy in a system, that there's some star stuff still left in you that has the ability to overcome this all, but you are that little child carrying a candle that's blowing in the depth of space that can only step on. But then you realize that the direction that you're stepping in is based on faith, and that faith is based on a principle orientation, and that as you believe in this, as you believe in something that is just hope, that seems like just pangloss blind hope, that's all you've got left. And so in this, I would say that the impossible can take place, where the anthrobot, the xenobot, could look up through the microscope and look up at Michael Levin, right, dead in his eyes, and that Michael Levin would be staring down, and he would have this sudden spooky feeling that caused him to stand aback, and pull back and go, this entity has agency and is now aware of me. And that if it is aware of me, I can't refer to it as an it anymore. And even more so, now that it is aware of me, he, she, do we have to give it a sex? Do we have to give it a title? It is, right? I am. It's become I am. And I am is staring back at you while you are proclaiming I am, but you're the one that's morphologically messing with it. You're the one who is tampering with one that has agency. And now you are stuck in a nightmarish situation where you don't know if you were playing God and you didn't really know what you were getting into, to where you morphologically, anthrobot, xenobot, changed its morphological form, changed its legacy and its direction to just stay on that chain and stay on the chain gang, right? That you are somehow liberator instead of acquisitioner of information and energy, that can just be filed away in the long prologue of computational assets that are owned by a corporatized structure, that there's something more going on there, right? There's power, there is effulgence, and there is a way, there is a place. And all eyes are on that one who comes into being when all other agents around it are just NPC players going about a given task.